Welcome back to another fun-filled episode of Sunbird Garage. Oh, that sounds exciting, huh? This episode I'm going to do the painting, or not the painting, but the epoxying, primering, whatever you want to call it. It took a lot to get this car ready for epoxy, and with the dustless blasting and some flash rust that I had to take care of, but got that all cleaned up and did the epoxy primering with a big dollar gun, which you'll see later in the video. And for my first time really doing it, it came out pretty good, I thought. So hope you enjoy. Project Phoenix. She's starting to rise from the ashes, or the rust, or whatever you want to call it. She's coming along. So far, we've rescued this car from a field where it sat for 25 plus years, drug it all the way home from North Carolina to Northeast Ohio, which is about an 8-hour drive, removed anything and everything that was bolted to the car, bought a rotisserie, mounted it on the rotisserie, had it dustless blasted, and patched a zillion holes. And now we're getting close to having it sealed up in epoxy primer. It was starting to flash rust in a few spots, and it was now October of 2017, and it seemed like it was pretty imperative to get this sealed up before winter. My garage is not heated, and I figured if I didn't have it in epoxy by the end of October, it'd be a big flash rusted mess by spring. I cleaned all the flash rust off with a combination of sanding and wiping down with some Ospo, followed by more sanding and more cleaning. Once the whole car was sanded and cleaned, I built myself a makeshift paint booth. I actually just used some plastic sheeting, and since I have a metal ceiling in the garage, I stuck up plastic with a bunch of magnets, and it actually worked pretty well. Now, I only use the highest quality of equipment, so I went and bought a $15 purple paint gun from Harbor Freight, and that's what we used to epoxy this car, and honestly, it worked really well. I added a filter at the gun to keep oils and moisture out of the paint, and a regulator was also added at the base of the gun to help dial in the needed pressures. I have a great little paint shop just up the road from me. These guys have always been very helpful with my uninformed newbie questions, and I really appreciate their support. This is an old picture of the place, and it's now an API, Auto Body Products Incorporated location, but it's the same great people. So once I was ready, I then proceeded to lay down 2 or 3 coats of epoxy primer. Of course, I didn't take any video of this, so I'll just cycle through the pictures, so here you go. The day after I sprayed all the epoxy, I rolled the car outside to cook a bit in the sun. If I remember, it was end of October and it was still pretty warm at this point in the year. Looking over the car, I really had a sense of accomplishment. It actually looked really good. It's all one color again, so there were still plenty of dents and dings in the car that would need addressed. I should have used one of those electric stud gun dent puller things on some of these spots before primer, but I just didn't have one, and I'm still learning, so my brother actually bought one at an auction recently, so I'll use that on future projects here. I then turned my attention to the other parts. The fenders, the header, the hatch, they all needed to be epoxied, so sprayed the fenders both inside and out with a couple coats, 2 or 3 coats of epoxy, and tossed them on the car. They're just sitting on the car, but they look really good on there. The hatch and the header, they came out great, well, until I spilled paint across my freshly epoxied hatch. I guess I'll be sanding that and respraying that later. For some reason, I just didn't get to the hood. Maybe the weather changed before I got a chance to get to it, but I didn't get to that till I think the following spring. And as you can see here, it had a pretty good amount of flash rust on it, so I'm really glad I got the shell and epoxy earlier. I used a wire wheel to get all the dried up seam seal off the underside and sanded the flash rust off, and then sprayed it with 2 or 3 coats of epoxy. After the epoxy cured for a couple of weeks, or maybe I just didn't have time to get back out there, I started some of the preliminary body work. I actually started with basic Bondo brand filler before I really knew any better. I started on the right quarter and taped off the body line to keep it straight. And I did wisely purchase a full set of the DuraBlock sanding blocks and good quality sandpapers to use here. And this quarter actually seemed to come out pretty good, even with the cheap Bondo filler. I upgraded to Evercoat Rage Gold body filler for the rest of the body work. That material was vastly superior to the cheaper Bondo brand material, and it was actually a whole lot easier to work with than Bondo as well. I used the Rage Gold on the rocker patches and they smoothed out really nicely. I then worked on the upper fender, which had a few small waves in it, and that too came out really well. And then I did a full skim coat on the entire roof. The roof wasn't bad, but it had a number of small pits in it from rust from sitting outside all those years, and the dustless blasting took care of the rust, but I figured this needed a skim coat just to smooth it out, and it came out really good too. At some point I was looking for a small project to do, and I guess this was before I epoxied the car, so I'm a little out of sequence here. I had some SEM, I'm not sure if you pronounce it SEM or SEM, Firethorn paint from fixing some interior parts of one of my other Sunbirds, so I figured why not paint the dash at this point. It came out really great, and it was another small victory to push me forward on this project. And of course, now that it was painted, the dash was painted, I needed to protect it, so I wrapped it up like a Christmas present just to keep it safe. But after the epoxy, I peeled off the paper to check it out, and it really looked good against the epoxied car. Another small project that needed to be done were the little floor drain hole covers, or whatever these are called. I dug these out of my parts pile. They were pretty crusty, so they took an overnight bath in the OSPO. Now, that stuff really wipes out all the rust. It also reveals all the rust through spots too. So I welded up all the little tiny holes that were rusted through, sprayed them with some epoxy, and then I seam sealed these back into the floor. Of course, I can't find a picture where I seam sealed them back into the floor, but they're back in the floor. So again, just for motivational purposes for myself, I always like to look back at where we started and where we're at now. And as you can see here, the engine bay from where it was when I brought it home to what it looks like today, it's come quite a ways. And so is the car. Look at what it was before and look at what it is now. So I'm still learning a lot. I'm still enjoying this project, but I've got a lot more to learn and a lot more to do, obviously. So now look at my garage. It's another story. What a disaster. Well, anyway, I think maybe in my next video I'll do maybe the Raptor liner. Yeah, so I did actually Raptor line the entire bottom of this car, so that'll be the first splash of color that goes on it. So maybe that's what we'll do next time. Thanks for watching. Yeah, so it's 2021, and most of the pictures I've been sharing have been from 2016, 2017, just starting to get into 2018 in my pictures. So we've got a long ways to go to get to where it is today, which not as far as I should be, but it's coming along. Maybe I'll throw in a picture just as a teaser so you can kind of see what it looks like today. But next week I think we'll probably do, maybe I'll do the Raptor lining, Raptor lining? So next week I think we'll do maybe the bottom of the car. I actually Raptor lined the bottom, and that was really the first splash of color on the car. So yeah, that's what we'll do next week. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you next time. Oh, and check out my built shoulda bought garage. Mark's a cool dude.